I was knee-deep in brown, silty water, staring at what used to be my wetlands, and what Natalie Adams, the HOA president, proudly called her community highway. The irony was painful. She said it would connect the neighborhood. What it really connected were every storm drain and ounce of runoff straight into my backyard. When I bought this land, I didn't see acreage. I saw balance, a living system that breathed with the rain. The cattails, the frogs, the mirrored surface of the marsh. It wasn't just dirt and water. It was a promise between nature and me. But to Natalie, it was dead space. She saw wasted potential, a blank canvas for her vision. And so, without permission or a single real permit, she poured a river of asphalt across sacred ground and called it progress. The road cracked within weeks, like the earth itself rejecting her arrogance. The day I watched the first fissure split through the asphalt, thunder was already crawling across the horizon. It felt less like weather and more like a warning, one she couldn't see coming. Welcome to Tomato Tales, where real HOA stories meet poetic justice, and arrogance always finds its consequence. When I moved here, I wasn't looking for neighbors. I wanted quiet. 60 acres of open sky, wind through reeds, frogs louder than traffic. My name's Thomas Harris, environmental consultant and full-time realist. For 25 years, I've told builders what not to build. Roads through wetlands, homes in flood zones, driveways over natural drainage. You'd think experience would make people listen. Then Natalie Adams arrived. She blew into Willow Bend Estates like a campaign ad come alive. Polished hair, brighter smile, and confidence that could drown logic. Her background was real estate marketing. Her favorite phrase, community improvement. At her first meeting, she stood before folding chairs and cupcakes, beaming at her slideshow. Imagine, she said, a lovely access road connecting the north gate to the highway, right through that underused swamp behind Thomas's property. Applause followed. No one questioned what underused swamp really meant. They didn't realize that patch of earth was the only thing keeping their basements dry. I caught her afterward. That swamp is federally protected, I told her. She smiled without blinking. Then maybe the law's outdated, she said. That night I watched the rain start to fall, slow and heavy. The kind that soaks through your shoes and your patience. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about pride. She thought the battle was over the land. She hadn't realized the storm was already choosing sides. Stick around and subscribe to Tomato Tales, where true HOA stories prove karma doesn't miss. 2 weeks after that first meeting, I started finding thin white envelopes in my mailbox, each stamped neatly with the Willow Bend HOA logo. At first, I thought it was the usual neighborhood nonsense. Updates, maybe a newsletter about pool hours. But when I tore one open, the words hit harder than a storm. Notice of violation. Your vegetation exceeds acceptable height limits. Standing water may pose a mosquito hazard. Failure to maintain property appearance in accordance with community standards. I laughed out loud. Maintain a wetland? What did she expect, and that I'd mow the frogs? Chlorinate the cattails? But then came another letter, and another. Each one harsher than the last, each carrying a fine. $100, $250, $500. By the third week it was obvious. This wasn't about mosquitoes. It was about control. Natalie Adams was using bureaucracy as her bulldozer. I sent official responses. Detailed, professional, airtight. I attached maps, my environmental licenses, references to the Clean Water Act, and even the Army Corps of Engineers classification that labeled my land as federally protected. It should have shut her down immediately. Instead, she doubled down. 2 weeks later, a flyer appeared in every mailbox. Special HOA. Meeting, infrastructure improvements. Discussion. Attendance encouraged. The infrastructure was her road, the one she wanted to cut through my wetlands. That evening, the meeting hall was packed. Free coffee, donuts, smiles, and Natalie at the front, all power suit and confidence. Behind her, a bright projector slide with words that made my stomach twist. Community Access Road Proposal. Friends, she began. We've all seen how unsafe the south exit is. Traffic. Blind turns, delayed emergency response. I'm proposing we solve it once and for all with a scenic access road. Polite nods. A few claps. I raised my hand. Madam President, I said evenly, that land is private. Protected under federal law. She turned that polished smile on me. Thomas, our updated records show an easement through that area. You might want to check your files. My jaw tightened. That's impossible, she shrugged. Maybe your maps are outdated. We have the newest versions. I held up my deed, my surveys, my wetland certification, all official, all signed and sealed. You start digging, I said, and you'll be breaking state and federal law. The room buzzed. She didn't flinch. Let's vote, she said sweetly. Hands rose. More than half. Motion passed. Natalie smiled like she'd just won an election. See? Democracy in action. I stared at her across that crowded room. You just voted to break the law. Her smirk didn't waver. Then I guess the law will have to catch up. That night I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, the hum of rain on the roof echoing my heartbeat. I'd seen reckless developers before, but never someone who mistook arrogance for authority. She wanted a fight? Fine, I wasn't going to give her one. I was going to give her evidence. She thought a few letters would scare me. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the wrong man. Stick around and subscribe to Tomato Tales, where every HOA story proves karma signs its own paperwork. It was a warm Sunday when my neighbor, Old Bill, showed up at my door. Mud on his boots, cap in hand. The kind of man who'd rather fight lightning than gossip. He looked uneasy. Tom, he said quietly, you'd better come take a look. We walked the path toward the edge of my wetland, boots sinking into damp soil. When we got there, my stomach sank. The marsh, my marsh, was lined with fresh orange stakes glinting under the sun. Survey markers. They were here this morning, Bill said, kicking one lightly. 2 trucks, few guys in vests. Said they're working for Adams Development Group. My throat went dry. They told you that? Yep, said the area's been rezoned. Thought you knew, rezoned? I almost laughed. Rezoned by who? Natalie Adams and her committee of donuts? I knelt examining the stakes. The old boundary markers my father and I had placed decades ago. Gone. Replaced with bright lying plastic. The line between truth and theft now glowed orange in the dirt. I took a deep breath. All right, I said. If Natalie wants to play engineer, let's see how she handles paperwork with teeth. Bill chuckled. That dry rasp of a laugh only age can shape. You're gonna make it ugly for her, ain't you? I shook my head. No, Bill, I'm going to make it official. That night the war began, quietly. No shouting, no lawyers, just documentation. I snapped photos of every stake, logged GPS coordinates, and set up trail cameras along the property line. Every flash of those tiny red lights was a witness. Over the next week, more letters came. More fines. Failure to maintain community uniformity, one read. $750 this time. Natalie's signature printed in blue ink like it was royal decree. When I called the HOA office, a chipper voice answered, Willow Bend Estates, this is Janet. This is Thomas Harris, I said. I just received another violation notice. Oh, Mr. Harris, she replied in a syrupy tone. Yes, those are automatically generated. The board's reviewing all properties bordering community land. Community land? I repeated. You mean my land? A pause. Then carefully, well, the new survey does show an expanded easement zone. President Adams mentioned she discussed it with you. I laughed, sharp, bitter. She discussed it with my mailbox. I hung up. That night I sat on my porch watching the wetlands shimmer under the moonlight. Frogs croaked louder than usual, maybe warning me, maybe cheering me on. Either way, the message was clear. Nature had chosen its side. I opened my laptop and began filing complaints. County zoning, state environmental protection, Army Corps of Engineers. Each submission was another brick in the wall I was building between Natalie and her fake empire. By morning, the first line of defense was up: the law. She thought a few orange stakes could redraw the truth. She was about to learn that boundaries don't move just because she says so. Stick around and subscribe to Tomato Tales, where true HOA stories show what happens when greed trespasses on nature. It started with whispers, the kind that slither through neighborhoods faster than wind through trees. At first, a few side glances at the mailbox. Then the flyer appeared, clearing the swamp for the good of Willowbend. That was the headline, printed in cheery blue ink above a cartoon drawing of me, fishing hat, binoculars, standing in a puddle, while smiling neighbors waited behind traffic cones. The caption read, "One man's swamp is everyone's problem." Natalie Adams had officially gone from HOA president to full-blown propagandist. The narrative was perfect. I wasn't a homeowner protecting his land. I was the stubborn roadblock standing in the way of progress. It didn't matter that she was trespassing or breaking environmental law. She had a story, and people love a good story, even a false one. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, curiosity had filled every folding chair. The smell of cookies and coffee hung heavy in the air. Bait for attendance. I sat in the back, camera hidden in my jacket, ready to document every word. Natalie took the stage like a politician at a rally. Behind her, a slideshow glowed with renderings of her so-called community connector road. Clean, white lines through a sanitized version of my wetland. No cattails. No water, just a glossy gray stripe. "Good evening, neighbors," she said, smile sharp as glass. "There's been a lot of confusion about this project. I just want to clarify. The new access road will improve safety, reduce congestion, and raise our property values by up to 15%. The room buzzed with approval. Then she pointed at the slide. A red line cut straight through my land. Currently, this area holds stagnant water, a breeding ground for pests. But with proper drainage and paving, it'll finally serve the community. That was it. I stood. "You mean destroy the community's natural flood control system?" I said, my voice echoing. Natalie turned, her smile glued in place. "Thomas, how wonderful of you to join us. Everyone, this is the property owner graciously hosting our expansion." "Hosting?" I repeated. "You're trespassing." A few uneasy murmurs rippled through the room. I held up my folder of legal documents. Deed, certifications, Wetlands Act. "For the record, this land is federally protected. You pave it, you're inviting disaster." She chuckled, glancing at the crowd. "Don't worry, everyone. Mr. Harris is very passionate about his ecosystem. But our engineers have approved everything." "Engineers?" I asked. Two men in matching polos and shiny boots waved from the back. "Contractors," she said proudly. "They're not environmental engineers," I snapped. "They're builders. Paid to pour concrete, not understand it." Her smile tightened. "Progress requires sacrifice, Thomas. And ignorance guarantees disaster," I shot back. The room erupted, half cheering, half arguing. Natalie slammed the gavel like she was conducting thunder. "Motion to approve Phase 1. Hands shot up. Motion passed. She looked at me with that same condescending smirk. "See? Democracy in action." As the room emptied, I stayed seated, watching her celebrate with her supporters. I knew what she didn't. The land was already keeping score, and when it came time to collect, democracy wouldn't save her. The next morning, the rumble of bulldozers echoed through the marsh. She thought she'd broken ground for progress. She'd just broken the dam of patience. Stick around and subscribe to Tomato Tales, where true HOA stories prove karma doesn't wait for a vote. The morning she brought in the bulldozers, the air smelled like rain and oil, an omen, if there ever was one. I woke to the low growl of diesel engines outside my window. When I stepped onto the porch, the world looked wrong. Massive machines sat at the edge of the marsh, their yellow metal arms reaching into the fog like beasts waking from sleep. Hard hats, safety vests, clipboards. And there she was, Natalie Adams, in a spotless white blouse and heels, standing on a mound of gravel like some queen of destruction. "Morning, Thomas," she called, smiling that rehearsed smile. "We're finally getting started." I felt the words catch in my throat. "You're trespassing on protected property," I shouted over the engine noise. She just waved her clipboard. "We've got approval." "From who?" "The HOA board," she said sweetly. I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound. "That's not how the law works, Natalie." She tilted her head. "Then maybe the law should catch up." The bulldozer's engine roared to life. A metal claw lowered toward the waterline, the same spot where I'd watched cranes nest for years. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my phone and hit record. Every second mattered now. I filmed the equipment, the license plates, the workers, her smug face. The first scoop tore through mud and cattails like paper. The wetland screamed. Frogs scattered, herons fled. My heart pounded like it was trying to fight its way out. "Stop the work," I shouted, stepping closer. "This is illegal construction. You'll be fined, sued, maybe even jailed." One of the workers hesitated, glancing nervously at her. "Ma'am, are we—" "Keep going," Natalie cut in sharply. "Mr. Harris is just recording for attention." That's when the county sheriff's truck rolled up. My complaint had gone through faster than I expected. The deputy stepped out, adjusting his hat. "Morning, folks. Got a report about unauthorized work on wetland property." I handed him my folder. Deed, certification, photos, timestamps. "That's the proof." Natalie smiled, all innocence. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. The HOA approved this project. The property lines are under review." He frowned. "Under review doesn't mean approved, ma'am." He looked down at the tire tracks sinking into the marsh. "And that's definitely a wetland." Her smile flickered. "I'll call my attorney," she said quickly. "Do that," the deputy said. But the machine stopped now. He ordered the crew to shut it down. Engines died. The silence that followed was almost holy. The frogs returned first, cautious, curious. The marsh seemed to exhale. Natalie's jaw tightened. "You think you've won, Thomas?" I shook my head. "No, nature did." She turned away, muttering into her phone. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. People like her never back down. They just look for another angle. But this time I wasn't alone. I had footage, proof, and something far stronger. Time. Because time was how nature fought back. And when it did, it never lost. The bulldozers left tracks. Deep, ugly ones. But the damage they caused ran deeper than anyone could see. Stick around and subscribe to Tomato Tales, where true HOA stories prove karma always digs deeper than concrete. The machines left, but their scars didn't. The once green marsh now wore streaks of mud and tire tracks like open wounds. And even though the sheriff had stopped construction that day, Natalie didn't waste time regrouping. A week later, her newsletter hit every doorstep in Willowbend. Community progress back on track. Minor delay resolved. Construction resuming soon. She didn't mention the sheriff, or the stop order, or the fact that half her project sat inside a federally protected wetland. I wasn't surprised, just tired. The kind of tired that sinks deep into your bones where outrage turns to resolve. So I did what she didn't expect. I stayed quiet. I waited. Then came the rain. Not the usual summer drizzle. This was the kind of storm that makes the horizon disappear. Sheets of water blurred everything into gray. The ground turned soft, the air electric. The wetlands, even damaged, did what they always did best, absorbed the flood. But the road Natalie had forced through that ecosystem wasn't built for nature's rhythm. Within hours, the asphalt began to weep, small puddles forming like warning signs. By morning, the first cracks had spread like lightning scars across the surface. I walked out in my raincoat, camera in hand, watching the scene unfold. The storm drains she'd connected to the road couldn't handle the overflow. Water gushed back up, spewing mud and debris like nature spitting out an insult. Across the street, Natalie stood under an umbrella, staring at her community highway. Her perfect hair clung to her face. Her designer boots sank an inch into the dirt. "Looks like the drainage plan needs a little adjustment," I called out over the wind. She turned slowly, her eyes sharp enough to cut steel. "Enjoy your laugh, Thomas. When this dries, we'll fix it," I smiled. "You might want to start with the foundation." That night, the storm got worse. The wetlands swelled, the water line creeping higher and higher. My cameras caught it all. The road bowing under pressure, asphalt peeling up like skin. The frogs sang louder as if cheering. By dawn, half the road had sunk 2 feet. The orange stakes that once claimed her territory now floated like driftwood. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, the damage was clear. The road was done for. Every dollar she'd stolen from HOA funds now lay buried under a mess of water, mud, and broken pride. But Natalie wasn't finished. Not yet. The next morning, she was back with a construction crew, barking orders, refusing to accept defeat. She thought she could patch up a mistake with more mistakes. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, camera rolling, because the way she was digging, both literally and figuratively, I knew exactly where this was headed. And nature? Nature was waiting just a little longer to prove her point. The cracks were only the beginning. The next storm wouldn't just test her road. It would wash away her lies. It started with a whisper, the soft hiss of rain against glass. But by nightfall, that whisper had turned into a roar. The sky opened like it was settling a score. Wind lashed through the trees. Thunder rolled over the hills. And every raindrop that fell seemed to remember exactly where it wanted to go. Straight back into the marsh, Natalie tried to erase. From my porch, I watched the water rise. The cattails bent, the frogs fled to higher ground, and the community highway vanished under a sheet of silver. I'd seen floods before. They're nature's way of reminding you who's really in charge. But this one was different. This one felt personal. By midnight, the drainage system Natalie had forced through my wetlands was working in reverse. Water gushed through storm pipes, bursting up through manholes, flooding driveways. The sound of collapsing asphalt echoed like thunder. I grabbed my camera and waded out into knee-deep water. Streetlights flickered through the rain, reflecting off the broken road. The scene looked like something out of a disaster film. Cars half submerged, mailboxes ripped from their posts, neighbors shouting into the dark, and there she was, Natalie Adams, soaked to the bone, standing in the middle of her crumbling masterpiece, waving her phone at a city worker like it could fix the world. "You need to block the south culvert," she yelled over the wind. The man shook his head. "That culvert's gone, ma'am. Water's coming from every direction." I stepped closer, recording everything. "You still think it was just a swamp?" I asked, my voice almost drowned by the storm. She turned, mascara running like war paint. "This isn't my fault, Thomas." "Maybe not," I said, "but it's your signature on the plans." A tree branch snapped somewhere nearby, slamming into the water. Natalie stumbled, catching herself on a guardrail that was barely holding up. The whole road shuddered beneath her heels. I reached out instinctively. "Get off the road." But before she could move, the ground gave way with a sickening crack. The section she stood on buckled, asphalt breaking like ice on a lake. Water surged through, dragging gravel, mud, and pieces of her dream with it. She screamed, not from pain but disbelief. The world she'd built on pride was literally washing away beneath her. The city crew rushed forward, pulling her to safety. I lowered my camera, heart pounding, rain stinging my face. In the distance, the wetlands stretched wide and calm, overflowing but alive. The flood had done what I couldn't. It took back what belonged to nature. When the rain finally stopped, silence settled heavy over Willow Bend. The road was gone, erased completely. By morning, news vans had arrived. Reporters with raincoats and microphones. Words like unauthorized project, negligence, and misuse of HOA funds started floating through the air. Natalie didn't show her face that day, but I had a feeling she was watching. The storm was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The storm had left the town in ruins, but by sunrise the real damage wasn't the kind you could see. It was the silence, that eerie quiet after disaster, when everyone's too stunned to point fingers but already thinking about who to blame. The community highway was gone. Not damaged, gone. What used to be a strip of asphalt was now a twisted scar of mud and debris, vanishing into a widening pool of water that had reclaimed its territory. The wetlands had won, but victory came with a price. Half the homes near the road had flooded. Basements filled with water, lawns turned to swamps, furniture floated like wreckage. And somehow, in that chaos, Natalie Adams saw her opening. The next day, the HOA sent out a statement. It was short, polished, and poisonous. Due to Mr. Harris's failure to maintain his property's drainage system, community infrastructure was compromised during the recent storm. I read it twice, my hands shaking with disbelief. She was blaming me. Within hours, my phone buzzed nonstop. Angry messages, voicemails. People who'd once waved at me now demanding compensation. I stepped outside to find a reporter waiting by my gate. "Mr. Harris, can you confirm the HOA's statement that your land caused the flood?" I looked straight into the camera lens and said, "That road was built illegally. The HOA destroyed a federally protected wetland. This flood isn't my fault, it's nature's proof." That night I uploaded my footage. Every clip, every document, every time-stamped recording, from the first bulldozer to the final collapse. Within hours, it spread online like wildfire. Comments poured in. Viewers didn't see a stubborn homeowner. They saw a man standing up against corruption and arrogance. By morning, the County Environmental Division had launched an investigation. The Army Corps of Engineers reached out, asking for evidence. I sent them everything. Meanwhile, Natalie was unraveling. She went from denial to desperation in a matter of days. News crews hounded her. Neighbors whispered, and the same people who'd cheered her on now avoided her gaze. At the next emergency HOA meeting, she showed up late, hair pulled back, eyes hollow. She slammed her folder onto the table and said, "This isn't over. We'll rebuild." Someone from the back, I think it was Bill, muttered, "Over my drowned yard." The room cracked with uneasy laughter. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to, because for once everyone could see what I'd been saying all along. The land was never the problem. It was her pride that flooded everything. And the water wasn't done rising yet. They thought the storm had washed the truth away. But the investigation was about to drag every secret back to the surface. Investigations have a funny way of starting quiet and ending loud. At first, it was just a few polite emails from the County Environmental Office asking for documentation. Then it was phone calls, long ones. Then came the unmarked white trucks with clipboards and cameras. Men in muddy boots walking the property line, shaking their heads as they went. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. The HOA hadn't just skipped permits. They'd forged paperwork. Natalie's development approval was nothing more than a photocopied letter with a fake county seal and her signature on the bottom. The bank account that paid the contractors pulled directly from HOA maintenance funds, money that was supposed to go toward landscaping, lights, and storm cleanup. Every corner they'd cut was now under a magnifying glass, and I was right there watching the cracks spread wider every day. A week later, The county called a public hearing. I sat in the front row, folder in hand. Natalie walked in wearing a dark suit, her confidence hanging by a thread. She didn't make eye contact. The news cameras caught every flicker of panic across her face. The lead investigator stood and began. Our findings confirm that the Willow Bend HOA conducted unauthorized construction through a federally designated wetland. Funds were misallocated, permits falsified, and environmental damage confirmed. Murmurs rippled through the room like aftershocks. Natalie rose abruptly. "That's not true. The board approved." "Mrs. Adams," the investigator interrupted. "The board cannot override federal law. And your signature is on every document." She froze. You could see the fight drain out of her. I didn't smile. I just sat there, silent as the reality finally settled in for everyone else. Outside the courthouse, a local reporter caught me. "Mr. Harris, after all this, what would you say to your neighbors?" I looked out toward the horizon, where the wetlands shimmered again under a gray sky. I'd say nature always remembers. It may bend, but it never forgets. The footage aired that night. Within hours, it was trending. Comments flooded in. Not just from locals, but from people across the country. Some called me a hero. Others said I was lucky. But I didn't feel like either. I just felt relieved. The county ordered the HOA to pay fines exceeding $100,000 and to fund a full restoration of the wetlands. Natalie was stripped of her position and barred from any future community leadership roles. Justice, slow, quiet, and inevitable, had arrived. And as for the wetlands, the repair crews began clearing debris. Grass started to grow again. The frogs returned first, like tiny green witnesses reclaiming their courtroom. But I knew the story wasn't quite finished. Because storms fade, investigations close, and memories dull, but arrogance always finds a way to come back. Just when I thought peace had finally settled over Willow Bend, the skies began to darken again. And this time, it wasn't just the weather. For a while, peace returned to Willow Bend. The frogs sang again. The marsh rippled under the sunrise. And for the first time in years, I could drink my morning coffee without feeling like I was preparing for war. The HOA had gone quiet. New leadership. Humbled meetings. No grand announcements or glossy flyers. Natalie Adams was out of sight, stripped of her title and dignity alike. Or so I thought. It was late autumn when the rumor started, whispered across fences and sidewalks. "Natalie's back." At first I didn't believe it. No one in their right mind would show their face after the disaster she'd caused. But then one morning, as fog crept low across the wetlands, I saw her, standing by the fence line, clipboard in hand, wearing a faded trench coat instead of her usual power suit. "Morning, Thomas," she said softly. I didn't answer. I just watched her step closer, her shoes sinking slightly into the damp soil, the same ground that had swallowed her last project whole. "I'm here on personal business," she continued. "I'm helping a private developer assess land use potential." I almost laughed. "You mean this land?" She smiled faintly. "Not exactly. The property next to yours." I've learned my lesson, Thomas. But her eyes, they told a different story. They weren't humble. They were calculating. That night I checked the county registry. Sure enough, a new application had been filed. Proposed drainage redirection and access easement study. Different company name. Same coordinates. Same plan dressed in a new disguise. The next morning I didn't wait. I called my contacts at the environmental office, sent copies of her old reports, and flagged her name under the investigation record. Within 48 hours, the application was denied. Natalie must have known it was me, because a week later I found a single envelope on my porch. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a short note in her perfect handwriting. "You can stop me for now, Thomas, but you can't stop change." I stared at it for a long time, then looked out at the wetlands beyond my window. The wind rippled through the reeds, carrying the scent of rain. Change, I thought, isn't the enemy. Greed is. A week later, another storm rolled through. Smaller this time, but steady. I stood on the porch and watched the marsh swell gently, doing exactly what it was meant to do. Absorb, protect, and heal. The road that had once defied it was nothing but a faint outline now, half buried under new growth. Nature had erased her mistake completely, leaving only the lesson behind. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens or court orders. Sometimes it comes in quiet waves and patient rains. And if you stand still long enough, you can hear it whisper, "I always take back what's mine." Her legacy sank into the mud. But the story didn't end there, because in Willow Bend, every storm carries a memory. Months passed. The wetlands had returned to their rhythm, the same slow, graceful breathing that had drawn me here in the first place. The cattails swayed like they were exhaling relief, and for the first time in a long while, the sound of frogs replaced the sound of engines. It's funny. People talk about nature like it's fragile, like it needs saving. But what I learned is that nature doesn't need heroes, just needs time, and for people to get out of its way. The restoration crews had done their part. They replanted native grasses, rebuilt the stream buffers, and removed the last chunks of broken asphalt that Natalie's road had left behind. It wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was healing. And healing, I've learned, is its own kind of revenge. Sometimes I walk out there just before sunset. The sky turns that deep bruised orange that only comes after a storm season has finally passed. The water reflects it perfectly. A mirror of survival. The neighborhood's changed too. The new HOA president, Mr. Dalton, actually listens. He met me out by the marsh one morning, shaking his head. Hard to believe someone thought paving this was a good idea. Some lessons, I told him. You only learn after they wash away. He laughed quietly. You ever think of joining the board? I smiled. No, I do my best work when I'm not invited to the meetings. Even Natalie, as far as I know, moved away. Rumor says she's working in another county now. Something to do with marketing again. I wish her no harm. Truly. Because people like her don't need punishment. They need time to face themselves. Every once in a while I get an email from someone who saw the video. Homeowners from other towns, other states, even other countries. They all start the same way. I thought I was the only one. That's when I realized what this story really became. Not revenge, not victory, but proof. Proof that truth doesn't drown easily, and that sometimes standing your ground means letting the ground speak for itself. The marsh hums now at night, alive with crickets and frogs, whispering the same message it's whispered for centuries. We were here before you, and will be here long after. I smile every time I hear it, because that sound, unsteady, patient, eternal, is nature's way of saying, case closed. In Willow Bend, pride built a road, but nature wrote the ending. The wetlands eventually returned to silence, that kind of peace that only comes after chaos has been washed clean. Every ripple, every breeze through the reeds felt like a quiet, "I told you so" from the earth itself. When I look back now, I realize that this wasn't just a story about one HOA president and one stubborn homeowner. It was about a bigger truth. How fragile balance becomes when pride decides it knows better than nature. People ask me sometimes, "Thomas, do you ever regret fighting back?" And I tell them this: you can rebuild a road, but you can't rebuild trust. Not with the land, not with your neighbors, not with yourself. Once you break that, all you can do is wait for time to forgive you. The wetlands forgave us in their own quiet way. The grass grew taller, the birds returned, and each rain since then has been a little kinder. The marsh doesn't hold grudges, it just remembers. I still keep one of Natalie's old survey stakes on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing means standing knee-deep in mud while everyone else tells you you're wrong. And in the end, when the storms finally came, the mud had the last word. So, if you ever find yourself fighting an uphill battle against arrogance, greed, or plain ignorance, remember this story. Remember that even when people twist rules or rewrite maps, the truth underneath the surface never changes, because the earth keeps receipts. And when the rain falls, it collects every one of them. You think this HOA story was wild? Wait until you hear about the one where a neighborhood buried a secret beneath their lake, and it didn't stay buried for long. Stick around and subscribe to Tomato Tales, where true HOA stories prove karma doesn't just knock, it floods your front door.